The wind howled across the empty highway, kicking up swirls of sand that scraped against the windows like skeletal fingers. I had been working the night shift at the station for years, but something about that night felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows along the aisles. Maybe it was the silence, thick and heavy, pressing in like something unseen was waiting just beyond the glow of the neon signs. Then they came in, a man and a woman, young, maybe mid-20s. They looked like any other travelers passing through, dusty, tired, desperate for gas. But there was something else, something in their eyes. Fear. The woman clung to the man's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Her head darted toward the glass doors every few seconds like she was expecting something, to follow them inside. The man, stiff-jawed and pale, walked straight to the counter. "Pump 4, he muttered, slapping down a few crumpled bills. I reached for the register, but my attention flicked to the security screen in the corner. The gas station had 4 cameras, one at the pumps, one inside, one watching the lot, and another at the back of the building. On the lot feed, something shifted, a shadow. It was barely there, just a quick ripple along the edge of the screen. But it was enough to make my gut twist. The woman let out a small, choked gasp. I snapped my eyes back to her. She had turned a sickly shade of white, her gaze fixed on the glass door. Slowly, I followed her line of sight. There was nothing there, not at first. Then, a shape, a sliver of darkness peeling away from the night. It moved too fast, too smooth, like it wasn't walking, but gliding. And it wasn't alone. Another one, taller, thinner, stepped into the dim light of the lot, its elongated frame just barely human. The man grabbed the woman's wrist and bolted. I barely had time to process what happened before they were outside, fumbling with the gas pump, moving too fast, too frantic. The figures didn't move. They just stood at the edge of the lot, watching. Then, the security screen glitched. The camera feed flickered. The figures were gone. The air in the gas station felt wrong, heavier. I swallowed hard and looked back at the lot. The couple was getting into their car now. The engine roared to life, the headlights blinding against the darkness. They sped off. I exhaled, feeling the tension ease just slightly. Then the cameras flickered again. I turned to the security feed. The moment they left, the figures stepped back into view. But now they weren't at the edge of the lot. They were standing inside, right behind me, a breath, cold, damp, right behind me. Every muscle in my body locked up, my hands gripping the counter so hard my nails dug into the cheap plastic. I didn't want to turn around. Every nerve in my brain screamed, don't. But something deep in my gut, some primal instinct older than fear, forced me to move. I turned. There was nothing there. The air inside the gas station was thick, almost suffocating. The hum of the overhead lights had become a low, vibrating whine, like something was feeding off their power. I forced myself to look back at the security feed. The figures were gone. I let out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself that my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe the screens had glitched. Maybe the couple's fear had infected me, twisting my thoughts into paranoia. But then I saw something else on the monitor, the woman's face. Not outside, inside. The feed from camera 2, the one pointing down the snack aisle, showed her standing between rows of shelves, staring up at the camera with wide, unblinking eyes. That wasn't possible. She had left. I saw her leave. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned my head slowly toward the aisle, empty, but I could still see her on the screen, standing there, not moving, watching. I felt a wet, creeping chill spread across my skin. My breath came in short, uneven gasps. I turned back to the monitor, and that's when I noticed. Her mouth was moving, soundless, lips forming words I couldn't hear. I swallowed the lump in my throat and reached for the mic on the store intercom, my fingers shaking as I clicked the button. "Miss?" My voice cracked. "Do you need help?" She didn't react, didn't move, but her lips kept forming those same silent words. A whisper scratched against my ear, close, right next to me. I spun so fast I nearly knocked over the register. Nothing. When I turned back to the monitor, she was gone. The aisle was empty again. The automatic doors suddenly slid open with a mechanical hiss, the cold desert wind rushing in. The air stank, something foul, rotting. I could feel it creeping into my nostrils, curling at the back of my throat. Then the chime sounded, the one that let me know someone had entered the store. I forced myself to look up. A man stood in the doorway. Not the same man from earlier. This one was different. Too tall. His limbs slightly too long. His skin wrong. Almost like it didn't fit right. Stretched, loose in some places, too tight in others. And his face. He was smiling, but not like a normal person. His lips stretched too far, curling upward in a grin that wasn't human. My stomach turned to ice. My fingers hovered over the emergency button under the counter, but before I could press it, the lights cut out. The gas station was swallowed in total, suffocating darkness. Then, right next to my ear, a voice. Not one, two. Whispering, breathing, laughing. And then, behind me, something moved. The whispering grew louder. A dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves scraping against pavement. It was right behind me. I couldn't move. My body locked in place, muscles rigid with terror. The emergency button was inches from my hand, but my fingers wouldn't respond. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there listening to whatever was breathing in the dark. Then the lights flickered back on. I spun around. Nothing. The gas station was empty. The shelves stood untouched, the coolers humming softly, casting pale reflections across the linoleum floor. The man in the doorway was gone. I sucked in a breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. I turned back to the security feed, sweat dripping down my temples. The monitors still buzzed with static, but through the haze of distortion, something moved on camera 3, the one outside by the pumps. The couple's car. It was still there, but that wasn't possible. I saw them leave. I heard the tires screech against the asphalt as they peeled out of the lot. But now there it was, sitting at pump 4, just like before. The driver's side door was open, and the woman, she was standing next to it. Not moving, just standing. I swallowed hard and reached for the radio under the counter. The station was out in the middle of nowhere, but there was always a chance of reaching someone. This is the... My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. This is the Midnight Gas off Route 19. I need assistance. Static. Then, a faint click. A voice. Turn around. Every hair on my body stood on end. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, like I was moving through a nightmare, I turned my head toward the glass doors. The woman was standing outside now, right in front of the door, too close. Her face was pressed against the glass, her eyes wide and glassy, her lips curled into a faint, unnatural smile. My stomach twisted. Something about her was wrong. Her skin looked gray. Her mouth hung slightly open, but her teeth were too white, too straight. Like they didn't belong to her. She lifted a single hand, pressed her palm against the glass. It left a bloody print. I stumbled back, my hips slamming into the counter. What the hell? The lights flickered again. The radio clicked back on. The same voice whispered, "Let her in." The glass door slid open. I barely had time to react before she lunged at me. I threw myself backward, hitting the floor as she slammed into the counter, her hands grasping, reaching. Her fingers clawed at the linoleum, nails splintering as she pulled herself forward with unnatural jerks. Her mouth stretched wider, too wide, revealing rows of teeth that weren't human. I scrambled backward, my bands slipping in something warm. I didn't have time to think. I reached up, grabbed the nearest thing, a metal flashlight, and swung. The impact sent a sickening crunch through the store. She collapsed. I gasped for breath, staring at her motionless body. My chest heaved. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then the security monitor flickered. I looked up. Camera 4, behind the gas station. 2 figures, standing in the shadows, watching. And then the woman on the floor twitched. A sickening crack echoed through the air as her limbs began to move, and she started to laugh. The laughter, that sound, it wasn't human. It was wet, gurgling, broken, like something was trying to mimic laughter but didn't quite understand how it was supposed to work. Her head twisted toward me, her neck snapping at an unnatural angle. Her glassy eyes rolled in their sockets, fixing on me as her mouth stretched wider. Too wide. Her jaw unhinged with a sickening pop, exposing not just one row of teeth, but layers. I scrambled backward, my breath ragged. My fingers slipped in the pool of blood spreading across the floor. Her blood. It should have meant she was dying, but she wasn't. She was moving. She pushed herself up with twisted, jerky movements, her fingers bending the wrong way. Her body cracked and snapped as she tried to stand. And then she screamed. A high-pitched, ear-splitting wail. The security monitors glitched violently, the store lights flickering so fast it felt like a strobe. The shelves rattled, cans tumbling to the floor. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound drilled into my skull like 1,000 nails. Then, the front door slammed open. A gust of cold air rushed in, carrying with it the foul, rancid stench of decay. Something stepped inside. The shadows at the door shifted, warped, grew, and then I saw it. Not a man, not even a person. Something else. It stood impossibly tall, its form flickering between human and not. Its limbs were elongated, bending in ways that bones shouldn't allow. Its skin, if it even had skin, was dark, rippling, shifting. Like smoke trapped in a dying body. Its head tilted slightly and then it moved. Fast. I barely had time to react before it rushed me. A powerful force slammed into my chest, knocking me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, my skull cracking against the linoleum. Pain exploded behind my eyes, a wave of nausea rolling through me. The woman was still there, crawling toward me, her body convulsing. But now she wasn't alone. More figures were emerging. From the shadows, from the back room, from places I knew no one had been a moment ago. They slithered forward, their limbs jerking unnaturally. Some had too many eyes. Others had none at all. Their mouths stretched too far, revealing jagged, irregular rows of teeth. And they were all smiling. My body screamed at me to move, but before I could, a hand grabbed my ankle. Cold, clammy, not human. I kicked, but the grip tightened. My nails clawed at the floor as I was dragged backward, my legs scraping against the tiles. My head turned toward the security monitors one last time. The outside cameras were black, except for one. Camera 4, the one behind the gas station. And on that flickering, grainy feed, I saw myself, standing outside, looking in. And then, the lights cut out, and the whispering returned. The Desert Gas Station Mystery Part 5. The whispering slithered through the darkness, curling around me like cold fingers. Multiple voices, too many to count. Some hissing, some giggling, some crying. I thrashed against the unseen grip, pulling me backward, my hands clawing at the linoleum, but the floor beneath me felt wrong. Not solid, not real, like it was melting. Then, the lights flickered back on, and I was somewhere else, no longer in the gas station. The floor beneath me wasn't tile anymore. It was sand, cold, damp sand. I sat up too fast, my vision tilting, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My fingers sank into the ground, pulling up handfuls of grainy, wet earth. The smell of burned metal and rot hit me like a wall. I looked up. The gas station was gone. In its place stood the car. The same one from the pumps. The same one that I saw leave. The same one that somehow never left at all. But now it was a charred husk. The windows had burst inward. The metal had melted in jagged, twisted formations, as if the fire had come from inside. The seats were blackened, nothing but skeleton frames, and the doors were open. I could hear something dripping. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stand. My legs shook beneath me, my breath catching in my throat. I turned my head, scanning my surroundings. Desert. Nothing but miles and miles of endless black sand. The sky overhead was an inky void. No stars, no moon, no light. Just emptiness. Then, a crunch behind me. I whirled around. The woman. She was standing at the edge of the burned-out car, staring at me. But now she wasn't just wrong. She was rotting. Her skin peeled in places, blackened and cracked like old leather. One eye had sunken deep into her skull, the other bulging wide, bloodshot and twitching, and her smile wider, impossibly wide. Her teeth, those two straight, two perfect teeth, gleamed in the darkness. I took a step back, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. What is this? She didn't answer. She just lifted her hand and pointed. I followed her gaze, slowly, toward the car, toward the back seat. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body screamed, don't, but I did. And I saw them, the real couple, burn, twisted, melted into the seats, their mouths frozen in silent screams, their eyes burned to hollow sockets. Their fingers were still curled into claws, as if they had tried, desperately, to escape before the fire consumed them. And that's when I realized, the people who came into the gas station, they weren't them. They never were. A shuddering breath rattled out of me, my stomach twisted violently, bile rising in my throat. And then the whispering returned. Not from behind me, not from the car, from inside my own head. I stumbled back, gripping my temples. My skull throbbed, the whispers growing louder, faster, overlapping. And then, one voice cut through the noise, clear, cold, right in my ear. You were never supposed to see. Pain ripped through me, my vision darkened. The last thing I saw before the world collapsed was the woman, still smiling. The Desert Gas Station Mystery, Part 6 Darkness. Not the kind you experience when you close your eyes. Not the simple absence of light. This darkness was alive. It pressed against me, seeped into my skin, slithered into my veins like it was trying to become me. The whispering was still there, but now it wasn't just in my ears. It was inside my skull. Then, a noise, distant, muffled, growing closer. A rhythmic thump, wet, heavy, like footsteps. I forced my eyes open. I wasn't in the desert anymore. I was back inside the gas station, but it was wrong. The shelves were bare, the floor covered in a thick layer of dust and grime. The overhead lights buzzed weakly, casting a sickly yellow glow over the counter. It looked abandoned, rotting. I pushed myself up, my body aching like I had been hit by a truck. My head pounded, my vision still swimming. Then I saw it. The security monitors, still running. I forced myself to look. The outside cameras were static, except for one. Camera 4, the one behind the gas station. The screen flickered violently, the image distorting, but I could still make it out. The burned-out car, the desert, and something standing just beyond the reach of the camera's light. A figure, watching. I swallowed hard, every instinct in my body telling me to run. Then, a sound from behind me. A wet, dragging scrape. I turned slowly and saw it. The woman. But she wasn't standing anymore. She was crawling. Her limbs twisted and broken, her spine arched unnaturally. Her fingers clawed at the floor, leaving deep, bloody streaks. Her head hung limply to the side, her mouth still frozen in that impossible grin. And she was getting closer. I stumbled back, knocking into the counter, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The intercom crackled to life. A voice, not hers, something deeper, something older. You shouldn't be here. My pulse thundered in my ears. My hand shot out, fumbling beneath the counter for the emergency button. The lights cut out. The whispering surged. Something cold curled around my wrist. And then, the laughter returned. But this time it wasn't coming from the woman. It was coming from everywhere. The laughter wrapped around me like a suffocating fog, thick and wrong, a chorus of voices that didn't belong in this world. The hand around my wrist tightened. Cold, clammy, not human. I thrashed, yanking my arm free, and stumbled backward into the shelves. Something brittle cracked beneath my weight. Empty boxes, rotted cans, things that shouldn't have been there. The emergency button. I had to reach the emergency button. I turned and came face to face with her. The woman's face was inches from mine. Her skin had begun to peel away, revealing dark, sinewy tissue underneath. Her eyes, milky and wrong, locked onto me. Then she spoke. Her voice was not hers. "You see now?" Her jaw cracked open, wider until her mouth was a cavern of darkness and teeth. I lunged away just as she lunged at me. Her hands swiped the air, missing by inches. I crashed into the counter, my fingers scrambling under it. The button was there, right there. I slammed my palm against it. Nothing happened. The woman, or whatever she had become, tilted her head, her mouth still stretched in that terrible, unnatural grin. Then she began to laugh again. The overhead lights flickered violently. The security monitors glitched, static screeching from the speakers. And then, through the interference, camera 4 came back into focus. The burned-out car was still there. But now the camera showed something new, something moving inside the vehicle. Through the shattered windows, I could see shadows shifting, writhing. And then, a hand reached out, charred, smoldering. My stomach turned to ice, because I knew what I was seeing. The real couple, still inside, still moving, still alive, or something close to it. The woman standing in front of me, she wasn't real. Neither was the man who had come with her. They weren't the victims. They were something else, something wearing their skin. The realization hit me too late, because the laughter stopped, and the gas station doors slammed shut. The lights cut out completely. And then, the whispering turned into screams. The screaming came from everywhere. It was raw, agonized, like 1,000 voices crying out at once. The darkness was thick, alive, pushing against my skin, sinking into my bones. I stumbled blindly, my hands outstretched, feeling for anything that could anchor me back to reality. The whispering returned, but now it was pleading. "Let us go, please. It hurts." And then, through the suffocating void, a spark, tiny, flickering, light. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but then it grew, a golden glow spreading outward, slicing through the blackness like a blade. The air shifted, changed. The suffocating weight of something evil lifted just slightly. I turned toward the source, and I saw him. An old man standing in the center of the gas station, his weathered hands raised. His eyes burned with gold, his face etched with something ancient. He wasn't afraid. The shadows writhed violently around him, twisting, screaming, trying to escape. But they couldn't. He spoke, not to me, but to them. "You do not belong here." His voice was power. A shockwave blasted through the store, sending the figures, the woman, the thing that had worn her skin, the twisted abomination that had tried to pull me under, reeling back, shrieking. The shadows peeled away. The walls of the gas station began to reform. The air lightened. The rot and decay melted away like it had never existed, and then they were gone. The burned woman, the twisted figures, the thing that had whispered in my ear. The gas station was whole again, like nothing had ever happened. The old man turned to me, his golden eyes fading back to a dull, human brown. He looked tired, so tired. "You saw too much," he said simply. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. His lips twitched, almost like a smile. "That's all right," he said. "You don't need to understand it all. Just know you were lucky." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Who are you?" His gaze drifted to the security monitors. Camera 4 was still showing the burned-out car. They were never supposed to linger, he murmured. But something trapped them, used them. He sighed. Not anymore. I turned back to the screen, just in time to see the car fade away. One moment, it was there. The next, gone, like it had never existed. When I spun back around, the old man was already at the door. He paused, looking back at me one last time. "Leave this place," he said. "It won't happen again, but you don't want to be here if something else does." And then he stepped outside and vanished. Just like the car, just like them. The gas station was silent again. The security monitors buzzed softly. The lights were steady. The register sat untouched. Everything was normal. And yet as I stood there, breathing in the stale air, one thought lodged itself deep inside my mind. The real couple never left the desert. So who or what had I spoken to that night? I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, got in my car, and never looked